Welcome to the D&D Fitness Radio podcast, brought to you by your hosts, Don Saladino from New York City and Derek Hansen from Vancouver, Canada. In episode 4, we speak with Brett Bartholomew about his conscious coaching approach to sport, fitness, and life. We're going to talk a bit about your book, The Conscious Coaching Approach. And the interesting thing for me is that when I watch Don work, he's like a conscious coaching guy right off the bat, right? Maybe I'm the identifier of conscious coaches. I just walk around and I detect them, but everything, a lot of the stuff that's in here, this is what Don and I talk about just in dealing with people and getting people to buy in and all that. So that's what I want to start with. And let's talk about your approach. And I know Don has a lot of questions to ask as well. So right off the bat, I've been coaching my kids' sports teams, and the biggest thing is not my knowledge. Like I have a lot of great knowledge, but nobody listens to me. It doesn't matter how smart I am. Like if I can't connect with somebody. So that's the biggest thing for me right now is how do I improve my ability to communicate, connect, develop relationships? And what do you have to say about that, Don, and as far as the stuff you're doing on a daily basis?
I was talking about it yesterday. It's, you've got a trainer and a coach. I almost feel like they're two different people. And every once in a while you meet someone special who've been able to merge them both together. And I battled with hiring them in the past. It's like you hire a trainer that's really good at his craft, and he understands the anatomy and kinesiology, and he goes in and he puts this thought into a program. And the second he gets on the floor, Brett, he just, almost ices up, becomes rigid. There's no flow. There's no connection. And, I went from trying to hire the best trainers on the planet to really hiring the best people. And they ended up turning out to be better trainers anyway. So it was like, hire someone. Like my philosophy in the beginning was, looking for this certification and this and that and education and master's degrees. And then after a while, I was like, make sure they're passionate and make sure that you want to go grab a beer with them. And if you got those first two things out of the way, we're off to a pretty damn good start. I don't know what your opinion is on that, but you've got to decline no matter what, whether it's the athlete or whether it's an individual on the floor. They have to want to come in and see that person that they're working with.
Yeah, I think what you described, we've all gone through. I mean, whether I was in the collegiate setting or at API for a while, we'd always have interns that came in with glossy resumes, glaring recommendations, all these things. And then it switched up a little bit when we started saying, okay, now you got to send in a video of you actually coaching some movements. But even that, to a degree, could be rehearsed. So then one of the places I was at when I was out in LA, I then started saying, all right, now you have to do those things, but also send a 2-minute improv like video of yourself, like just 2 minutes, whatever. And these guys would be like, what does that have to do with anything? I have this credential, that credential, I have a master's degree. I go, great. Coaching is adapting, and there's creativity involved, and there's thinking on the fly, which is actually funny because in the glowing world that is the Twitter sphere, some PhD guy, and certainly this isn't indicative of all PhDs, but this guy seemed to want to get in a debate that creativity is not a necessary tool for coaches to be successful.
Wow.
And I said, let me get this straight. It's a socially bound process, like coaching is. It's socially bound, dynamic, and there's problem solving inherent in that, regardless of what format it comes with, right? Like I go, you don't need creativity for that. And he said, if creativity was needed in coaching, Adam Sandler would be the head coach of San Antonio, not Popovich. And I just thought, oh, wow.
I don't agree with that at all.
Right. There's so many things. I wanted to say, like, is that where you really went with this argument?
Really?
Like, you and your ivory tower deductive reasoning, but neither here nor there. To your point, what I was saying is when we started looking more at people's ability to be themselves, and yes, of course, blend, pragmatic scientific knowledge with just the ability to be a good dude or girl or whatever, like that's what matters, because nobody wants to sit there and be talked at. They want to be talked to, and that's what people that are socially entwined or interconnected, understand.
Have you, Derek, here we go. I'm starting already. I'm going to start jumping around.
Oh, that's okay.
This is who I am. I'm sorry. It's the first thing that popped into my head here. But
just be you, man. Just be you.
Man. I can't do anything but. I've been in situations where I've been with a clientele who's extremely successful. You know, they're paying you money. Obviously, this is part of your livelihood, and you've got to figure out a way to give them a little bit of what they want while you're still, you know, not veering off the path, and you're still doing a lot of what you want. I can't mention his name, but probably one of the biggest names in the world, most recognizable names in the world, came to me a few years ago and said, listen, I know what you're trying to do with the screening. I completely understand it and I respect it. He said, but I've gone to so many coaches in the past and they sit here with all this mobility work and I get so bored of it and I'm not going to stay here and I'm not going to do this. So I'm in here for an aesthetic goal in mind. So right there, this guy is already, you know, it's negative. He's telling you that he doesn't want to see. So I turned to him, I said, listen, I'll make you a deal. You get in here early, you do some of your light warm-up stuff, whatever you need to do to get ready for the session. You give me 10 to 15 minutes of whatever I want. And you know what, man, we'll come back in and we'll get that pump and we'll do those things that you want to do. Now, in the beginning, I'm looking over my shoulder going, all right, what's going to happen if someone walks in and sees this? But after a while, I said to myself, you know, part of training in the environment that I'm in is it's not fully about, you know, how many touchdowns someone's going to score. It's about energy. It's about developing resiliency in the body. Okay. Because I want people as they get older not to get hurt and they want them to be strong and I want their bodies to be resilient and I need them to have fun because if they're not having a good time doing what we're doing, they're not going to come back. It doesn't mean I'm going to have them stand on a Bosu ball with one leg and start throwing med balls around the room. That's not my style. But there is a little bit of give and take. Do you find yourself having to make that same adjustment living in the athletic world? Because it's different. We're similar, but we're also very different with the people that we work with.
Derek, do you want to spearhead that one or you want me to go first?
In many respects, some of these athletes have the same mentality. Like they're not thinking, I want to score more touchdowns. They're like, hey, I want to look better. So for after the game, when I go to the bar or the party or I'm at the pool and, you know, in Mexico, like some of the same issues, right? So,
good.
Brett?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, it's a balance. And I think a lot of the things, that's why we say it's a bit more interrelated than anybody would really like to admit, because I give athletes 90% what they need and 10% of what they want, you know, and you'll get guys that come in and say, hey, I got to do this. I got to that Drake's having a pool party. I got to be there and fight. And you're like, dude, what? Like this is off-season training. Like it's a balance depending on the guy and the relationship I have with them. Like if they're a new guy and they're kind of a distractive force and what have you, and we have a good group, I'll tell them just to kind of, I'm like, hey man, shut it down for a little bit. We'll get there. Let's get a good foundation set and then we'll be able to do these things. Right. So that way we can really kind of get them ingrained into the culture. On the other hand, if it's a guy I've worked with the past 4, 5, 6 years, for sure. Like hopefully if I've done my job, we have a dynamic where I'm more like a composer in a symphony. I don't need to be this rigid person telling him exactly how to play his instrument. I know that there's a range that exists there. Right. And I know that as long as I'm doing X, Y, and Z, that gives them a little bit of flexibility and us a little bit of gray area in which to experiment. Now, you know, you do have to be careful because these guys, and I mean, no different than you, if somebody signs on to a massive movie contract, right, there's a huge component in that. And so some of these guys have money, but it's not guaranteed money. So I can't get too cute with them. But everything in life is done in the gray area. My brother owns a couple restaurants and I think they've had 3 or 4 different chefs come through there and not one of their pinch of salt is the same damn pinch of salt. Yeah. So I think just people get a little bit silly and you know, like you've been in it long enough and Derek and I talk about this a long time. Anybody that gets in these on their high horse about absolutes and all this stuff is usually just trying to make things black and white because it's a world in which we're trying so hard as coaches or trainers to demonstrate value because there are so many variables at play that we just like to latch on to these dynamic contrarian topics. It's not that hard. Push, pull, squat, hinge, run, throw, have a little fun, interact with the person, let them tell you about their problems in their life and shit, and then let's get on with it. And make sure you record the results so you can reproduce some aspect of it.
Right, and obviously a quantifiable measure I think is always a great gauge, especially for someone who's not, you know, that into it, which I'm sure you come across. There's certain guys that come in, they're like, listen, I'm an athlete. I understand that. I just don't love the weight room or I don't love the performance end of it. I like going out and playing, but you know, anytime I've been able to show someone some type of quantifiable measure to them, oh, wow, that went up 10%. That's pretty cool. Wow. It was like, you know, a little motivating right there. Right.
And to your point where you talked about the mobility work, where that's getting now, and Derek, you can, you know, chime in if you want, is that's almost where it's getting a little bit crazy with the technology in S&C. is somebody will come out and watch one of my sessions and be like, hey, you know, you didn't omega wave them, or you didn't do this, or you didn't, you know, test her, you know, what was her resting heart rate this morning? This guy's got 60 minutes with me and he's got to get to a doctor's appointment on the other end of town. I asked him what he ranked his sleep, what he ranked his hydration, what he ranked his soreness, you know, his training willingness. And then I'm going to look, like, we have jump mat stuff involved with the session today. So some of this is organic and part of it. I'm not always going to be able to have them come in and do HRV and omega. And then you get people that say, well, do you not believe in those things? No, overeager guy. Like, I believe in those things fine. Like, I just don't do them all the time because everything has to blend together and you know, have a point to it.
And some people, I mean, listen, I used Omega Wave for probably over a year. I've met with Val. I've sat with them, with Charlie Weingroff. We've gone through it. I got pretty decent at it. And there were certain people that I brought it to, athletes that I brought it to, that it clicked with. And there's others that just got really discouraged. They were, they're testing themselves on a Wednesday and they're a professional golfer and they feel like they're in the green, but they're in the red. And then suddenly they're on the chipping field, like, why am I in the red? Like, you know, and then the mindset's gone. And I'm like, damn, you know, sometimes, you know, it could be too much information for someone. And sometimes it creates too much stress. And, you know, that's, again,
your job as a coach, you're that filter. You're that filter that's supposed to sell that to them in that way. And, you know, there's other coaches that talk about it. Like, if I have a guy that thinks he's in the red, or it shows he's on the red, and then he's got to play the next day on a Sunday, what does that do to his psyche? So when says, do you believe in X, Y, and Z, whether it's mobility work, Omega Wave, I'll say yes, but it's got to be applied appropriately, and it's not the end all be all. People just don't want to admit that our field is not one in which there's one answer. It's the difference between things that are complicated and things that are complex, which is what, like, the online course that I'm working on goes into. Trying to predict the next solar eclipse is complicated. You know, it's hard, but if you apply an algorithm and math, we can get that answer of when that thing's coming. Trying to do that for the human body and get everything down to this, you can't do it, because it's almost like saying, hey, Don, in 3 years, what do you think the price of oil is going to be at? You know, that depends on so many different global economies and markets. It just doesn't work. It's apples and anchovies. You can't even say oranges because fruit can be compared.
Do you feel like as you become more and more advanced, because you have, obviously, I mean, as I know as a coach, I'm 10 times a better trainer and coach than I was 10 years ago. But do you feel like things have gotten almost a little bit more simplistic as time goes on? I mean, even program design now, I go back and I'll look at templates that I wrote 10 years ago, and it's a little bit more of a Chinese menu. Now it's like you said, push, pull, hinge, squat. You know, it's like it becomes much more simplistic.
Yeah, I mean, I'll get this. This may not be appropriate, but I think this is supposed to be more of a fun podcast. I think it's kind of like when you're a teenager and you hear about all these exotic sex positions, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, look at this. We can do the Taiwan pile driver, you know, and then as you get older, you're like, there's probably some standbys that work really well. And those other pieces just sell magazines. Like, you start off and you see all these different forms of periodization and all this. And at one point in time I was doing, not just undulating, but daily undulating or weekly undulated. Now I can do auto-regulatory methods within it. And then you're like, fuck, it's all the same.
I just like how Brett combined the Chinese menu with the sex positions and the Taiwan.
I love it. I was about to say, sometimes missionary just works, man.
It depends on the girl.
Put a nice mirror up in the corner, you know, let her get into a good position, and that's the meat and potatoes right there. We don't have to get more crazy than that, you know?
We all just got #MeToo'd, really.
We're talking about our wives here. We're allowed to say that.
Yeah, we're all married. Okay.
It's completely consensual. I want to just segue into this whole concept that's really highlighted in the book about buy-in, and we touched on it a bit. So if you have technology, and some people like it, some people don't like it, what are the key issues for both of you? And we'll start with Don. How do you get people to buy in?
You know what? It's funny. It's that first few minutes. I feel like you and Brett agree or disagree, but a good coach can immediately understand who he's dealing with on any given day. You know, I mean, whether it's a new client or whether it's a client that might be volatile in their mood. You know, I had it this morning with a celebrity that I was working with. He came in and I could tell first 10 seconds he walked in. I was like, all right, like, we gotta kind of smooth him over a little bit. So it was a little less talking. You know, I went up to him, I said, listen, the next 10 minutes, let's just get you warm. You know, I don't feel great. I said, no, I get it. And we're just going to take it easy. We're going to marinate into this. And within 10 minutes, you know, the guy's energy and his mood pumped up. So I really think that's the hardest thing about coaching. I mean, it's it's very instinctive. It's one of those things where, you know, as a human being, to be able to go in and read someone else well and be able to adapt to them, I feel like that's something that you just can't, you know, you can't teach at AP, you can't teach anywhere in the world. I mean, that just comes down to just being a good human and knowing how to adapt. And that's how simple I like to approach it. But that's,
yeah, no, the key word there, and one, I like the way you kind of phrased marinate into it. That's a nice little, it's instinctive, you know, like, and that comes from, like, you look at intuition, and this is something that one of the most interesting books I read, I think it was a year or two ago, was Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. And he just talks about the role of intuition and decision-making. And, you know, intuition is instinct. You know, it's being able to develop this feel of what should come next, and not based off bias, but based off how well you've reasoned in the past. So, like, if you see something that went wrong in the past or something that went well, not just thinking of that moment, but thinking of all the antecedents that led up to it, all the things that came after it, all those pieces, and saying, okay, this now guides, this gives me a barometer of where I need to take things in the future and how I coax them in there. I mean, it is a seductive kind of influential process. I know people don't like those terms, seduction, manipulation, influence, but all those things just basically boil down to an alteration of something. And you see a client that comes in and they're kind of dragging ass, then yeah, you've got to be a different version of yourself. You can't be the college strength coach that's like, let's go!
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
That works for an 18-year-old kid that's part of a university where he's got a player, the coach is going to ride his ass. That doesn't work for a multimillionaire, you know? And this is where sometimes I'll get in debates with guys that are still collegiate strength coaches. You know, they'll say, oh, you guys, you know, you cater your pros, you cater this. And I'm like, I don't cater shit, man. But the bottom line is, I'm not going to sit out here and yell at these guys like they're 18-year-old kids. You get on them like a professional and you hold them accountable in different ways, you know? And I think that the problem with it too comes down to everybody's got this boilerplate idea of what leadership is. Like that coaching is just supposed to be this warm, empathetic, I'm your buddy, I'm your pal stuff. I'm sure you can attest on, like, there's times where, you know, some guys that you're going to have more of a collegial relationship with, where you give each other shit. You can kind of, you know, push their limits a little bit, get on them. And then there's other guys that, yeah, you might have to be a little bit more compassionate oriented, but it's not this like John Wooden approach for everybody at all times. Like, you have to understand which part of yourself to be when. And that's not being fake. That's just being adaptable and having
adaptable and diverse. I mean, as a coach, I feel like, what is the goal of a coach? The goal of a coach is to get everything you can get out of your player that you want, right? I mean, when I'm coming in, I'm coaching someone. When you're coaching someone, the goal is optimization. Whether that means a recovery day. You know, I've got guys that, like, when I bring up the word recovery, they're like, no, I got to push through it. I'm like, listen, they didn't show Rocky in bed for 6 months after he fought Drago. You know what I'm saying? It's like they only show the scene where he's climbing the mountain and he's got the log on his back, and it sets such a bad precedent for us, because then every athlete coming in is like, come on, I want to work hard. I want to work hard. I'm like, hard work today would be us downshifting, keeping our heart rate between 120 and 140 for 40 minutes. Working on some mobility, breaking a light sweat, leaving here feeling confident, getting some good nutrition in you, getting a good night's sleep, and then coming back tomorrow, and then we can stand on it a little bit.
Yeah.
But people have this mindset that harder. I mean, no shit, P90X. It's like, if you take someone sedentary, you put them in the gym 6 days a week for 90 minutes a day when they've been sitting on the couch, of course they're going to lose weight. You know what I'm saying? Like, what happens to them after the 90 days? Like, are they able to continue that? I just feel like in this industry right now, you've got coaches and you've got cheerleaders. You've got a coach, and not to toot our own horns, you got guys like us who could come in and we can adapt to the client, and we're in for this long-term approach. And then you got cheerleaders that are showing up. And I'm not bashing all of them. I'm definitely bashing a handful of them at these group fitness concepts, because they're coming in, it's rah, rah, rah. They're just, it's all about the sweat, and it's setting a bad example for what it really takes to improve.
Well, and I'd even add a third one. I'd say now, and I have to be careful how I phrase this, now you almost have these I think they fancy themselves as scientists or academics, but, you know, like, they've almost tried to popularize sports science, where they come in there and it's all about the tech. You know, you could just call them gearheads, you know, and it's like, they don't even look up from their iPad or their iPhone because they're too busy using their paperless apps and everything to track everything. It's like, there's some shit you just can't track, man. Like, you get a coach from the 1950s, he's still going to run circles around some of the coaches today, regardless of the tech. And, you know, we've already been over it. That's not me saying that tech isn't valuable. It's saying that people, I think, use that now just like cheerleaders use this energy and enthusiasm. I think they use it to overcompensate. I think that they don't have a certain element that, they can use that intuition or instinct or the relatability. And so they try to say, this is my answer to that. It becomes a totem. It becomes a totem for them to kind of derive power from.
Your buddy Ben Bruno passed a comment. It was one of his posts, and I chuckled at it, and he was so right. He was discussing how a lot of these, and I'm holding up my phone, internet coaches now who've never actually stepped on a field with a player and never actually had to adapt to a client coming in or work with a physical therapist, they're out there and they're just, it's very fluffy and it's very one-dimensional. They don't understand the process. They're just launching their product on the internet. They've got a great set of abs or a great ass, and because of that, they're able to develop popularity, and suddenly they're considered as an expert.
Yeah,
I've been doing this for 20 years. I'm still a student. Like, for me to say I'm an expert, like, I'm a professional, but like expert, like, to me is like, God, I feel like I know. Fine, I know this much more than the average person, but I feel like I know this much in the industry. You've got to agree with that. There's a level of humility that you have to be a great coach.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one of the first quotes I put in the book is, we're all apprentices in a craft in which none of us become a master, by Hemingway.
Wow.
And of course he was talking about writing, but that's everything. And I stole that quote direct from Robert Greene's book Mastery, which it's interesting in the title because the whole book is about how you really won't become a master, and that's coaching. And I think, again, that goes into the natural insecurity of why we have, think about the people in our field. Most of us were like slightly above average to slightly above average athletes. Like, even if you were a pretty solid one, you probably weren't world class, or at least most. Strength training was a way for us to kind of get an edge, either physiologically, psychologically, or both. So we're all some people that have a lot of energy, work ethic, and wanted to prove ourselves. And the problem is for some people that never tears off, and they have to understand that when you're a coach, eventually at some point, your desire to prove yourself has to go down, because now it's about the people you're serving. That doesn't mean you're not relevant. That doesn't mean you're not visible. That doesn't mean you're significant. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you still have to have those things. That's why, all this kind of brand bashing stuff that people are doing, it's not wrong to have a brand. It's bad to have a brand when you use it for the wrong reasons.
Right.
And I don't build a brand, find a voice, but the bottom line is there's got to be this dynamic, but so many coaches still want to make it about kind of this chip on their shoulder, and they think they deserve this and that. And so they're quick to label themselves masters when they come from printed degree university, and it's pretty exhausting.
I mean, you guys are talking about like being an expert, being a master, but I think in both your cases, you can be a leader and not necessarily have the mastery that you want. And so when you work with in Don's case, you're working with a billionaire or a top grossing actor, or Brett, you're working with a $20 million quarterback. How do you establish leadership amongst those types of people who are leaders themselves?
I think the first thing you do is, you give ground to gain ground. Like, I don't try to establish myself as that, because you're only an expert in an athlete's life or an individual's life if they invite you in. Like, you can't come in with some perceived authority unless you're like this 74-year-old guru, who basically, like, everybody just knows this dude's like the Yoda of this shit and we're all flying out to see him. I give ground to gain ground, which means immediately I'll just say, hey, I want to make it very clear I'm here to help. I know you have goals. I do as well. My goals are to help you, but at the same time, I'm more of a teacher than I am a waiter. With a teacher, there's a set and established guidelines of rules and expectations and do's and don'ts. A waiter is going to come around and be like, hey, what do you need? Is it too hot? Is it too cold? Can I wipe the sweat from your brow? Like, I'm not that guy. I'm like, so there's going to be some times where we're not going to get along, or like we might have some friction, but just know I'm always here for you. I've just got to also save yourself from yourself at times too. And I just ask them, I say, like, what coaching styles have you liked in the past? Who's resonated with you in the past? What's been done wrong? And then I tell them to call me out on something too. I go, I'm not perfect. So if something I say doesn't hit or resonate or offends, let me know. It's going to be a process. It's a relationship.
Whether you think this or not, you can't teach what you have. You really can. I mean, like, you have a gift of communication with your athletes, with people. I mean, I see it sitting here right now. There's a specific dialect that we have. I feel like I've known you for a while. That's not something you can force upon. That's not something you can teach. I feel like that's just something you have. I feel like we can train a trainer, a coach to know and to understand. Shit, you know what? We can grab a guy from MIT right now to read every training manual in the next 3 days, and he'll probably bury me on any exam. You know what I'm saying? It's like, but he doesn't have that experience. He doesn't have those reps. And as you were talking, I think genuine, that's the word that pops into my head. And that's what you have to genuinely earn someone's trust. And you can't do that by going in and trying to prove how good you are. You just got to be you. You got to trust your ability. You've got to go in there. You've got to connect with the person. You got to tell them, listen, Rome wasn't built in a day, but I'm gonna promise you one thing. I'm going to go home tonight. I'm going to be thinking about your session tomorrow. That's who I am. And let's just have a good time, and let's have a dialogue. If there's something that's not clicking or not feeling right, I need feedback. I don't want to hear 4 months from now, well, I didn't like this movement. That's why. No, like, give me feedback. There's nothing you can't tell me. And I feel like when you start that rapport with someone, I feel like you're golden.
And Derek, I think you've always excelled at that. I mean, even from when you and I first met, like, you're very inquisitive, but never in a way, some people are inquisitive in a sense that, like, you get this feel that they're judging you when they're asking questions and waiting on your responses. So yeah, it's great that they're good listeners, but you can tell that there's a lot of sub-vocalization happening. Derek has always been somebody that's really good at, he's interesting because he really is interested, because he'll take one thing you said that you didn't think you heard, and now that's tailspun into another topic. And you're like, wait, Derek, I thought we were going this way, but it actually ends up becoming a better conversation. And I think that's a big reason why, Derek, you have the eye that you do. You'll see something going on with the ankle, or you'll see something going on and you're trying to separate the signal from the noise, that I don't think 90% of other people see. And you've just been attuned to do that, and so I think there's a difference with that too, is even when you look at listening or stepping back, not all listeners are the same either. There's judgers and there's people that are actually truly inquisitive for more genuine reasons.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just highly insecure, so that I just use that to my advantage. I'm thinking, I don't know if I know anything. Work that much harder. But that's one of the questions I had for both of you guys is what, in Brett's book, he talks about knowing yourself before knowing others, right? And working with others. So what, and again, I'll start with Don. What do you know about yourself that makes you better? Or, do you play to your strengths? Or, what can you tell us about yourself that makes you good?
I'm always trying to improve my weaknesses, but I know to be great at what I want to do, I've got to surround myself with people in areas that are just flat out better than me. And what I'm really good at also is understanding in business and in life that at a certain point, I kind of have that gift of saying, all right, this isn't going to work. Like we're hanging in too long. It's time to pivot. I've changed my business model several times because of it, but there's that fine line of when's too soon or when's too long. So I think it is, I've developed a level of humility. I've established some great relationships with people, and my business and my career has really gone in the direction because of this interpersonal skills. And am I a knowledgeable coach? Am I a knowledgeable trainer? Absolutely. But it was the other things that really forced me to excel. Knowing what I wasn't good at was really important.
How about you, Brett?
Yeah, I think your biggest strength should be knowing your weaknesses. I think mine were forced upon me really early when, and I wrote that chapter early in the book when I was hospitalized. I had this issue with, I would take an action and make it an identity. So if I failed at something, I was a failure. And I think that really came to play too when I got into boxing competitively. I would say that I was a victim of success early on because I won my first fight by a quick knockout. You're like 20 years old, you're running around like pure adrenaline. I lost my second fight by points. I was fighting a taller guy. I had no idea how. I'm just going in there, going, and I didn't even feel like I was in a fight. This taller, lanky guy just jabbed me to death, and it annoyed me because I'm like, hit me, at least if you're going to win, like hit me. But it didn't matter. He won the fight. And I remember my girlfriend was was there. My best friend was there. Nobody was there to see my knockout. Everybody was there to see my loss. And I was so pissed that I didn't fight again for 4 months until I had enough sparring partners that were a certain height that I felt like I was confident in this again. And so like, I was so scared of failure for no real reason. It was just me. It was like me living up to my own expectations. And then, you realize that eventually you just got to get over that shit, because I didn't really learn anything from my first fight. Like you win by knockout, you're just like, yeah, like it fits every kind of like self-aggrandizing thing you have. you lose a fight. Now all of a sudden you're like, all right, I've got to face some insecurities here. So I think just facing your insecurities and not expecting anybody else to give you feedback, like you're responsible for all that shit. So at the end of the year, sitting down and being like, what am I bad at? What am I good at? What do I need to address? And a lot of that is how I ended up finding this path. I was finishing 1 year of coaching, and I was just doing some kind of self-reflection stuff. And I asked the guys, I go, hey, why do you come to me? And, at the time I was just big into programming. That's all I cared about, programming. And they were like, well, you write good workouts. I'm like, yeah, but guys, a lot of people write good training programs. Like, why do you come to me? Hey, it's the way you explain things. And I'm like, oh, all right. And that fed into my master's degree and everything else. So I started looking at, what is kind of the science behind the art of coaching? What does help people connect? Like what helps people tune into certain messages from certain people in certain ways, and the art of timing. And that's how I went down this path. So long-winded answer, but working on my insecurities the same way Don said is what ends up leading you to your greatest strengths. It might be a direct road, it might be a fork in the road, but you get there regardless.
Everyone I've worked with has had insecurities at one point. Myself, the biggest clients in Hollywood, and this is what I think most people need to take from this is, they're under the assumption they see these guys on the field and they're always successful throwing the touchdown, and they're, walking off the field in this light and they're on the poster board, or the actor being in the movie, yet they're having problems with their girlfriends. Yet they're, they're out, they wake up certain mornings and they're like, shit, I drank too much. Like, what did I do? Like, they're going through the same crap that normal people are going through. And it's just part of not to get all kumbaya on you, but like everyone, it's okay. Like, we're doing the best that we can as human beings. I think we just got to take a deep breath and just try and, live life a little bit and not be so controlling. That's another big problem that I always faced.
Well, how do you... Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, how do you guys incorporate the whole concept of failure and embracing failure with the people you're working with?
I set them up to fail. What I mean by that is, of course, we set them up for success, but I'll do some things where one that always comes to mind, and it's boring as heck, but it's always a go-to. I'll get guys on a line, and it might be an acceleration day, and we're doing push-up starts, and you know the deal. If you just go off a clap or a basic command, fastest guy is usually always going to win, or at least the one, it's best strength to body weight ratio, good acceleration. It doesn't have to be good acceleration mechanics. Fastest guy is going to win, however you want to term that. But I'll just give them math problems. I'll be like, all right, dickheads, there's cognitive tasks involved with sport. I'm not your accountant, but you're going to do some math. I go, when the answer is an odd number, you're rolling, right? And everybody's done some variation of this, so this isn't some magic drill, but when it's an odd number. And so inevitably, I'll do, I'll go 4 by 3. 3 by 3. Well, somebody always goes on 4 by 3 because they hear odd number and they hear 3 and they want to win and they go. So I remember one time I was doing this, and a lineman, he used to play for Ohio State, and then he played for the Chargers for 5 years. He had gone on every single wrong command for the last 5 times. And I'm like, dude, get your shit together, because there was an issue with him. He always had false starts. So I go, all right, man, when the word I say ends with the letter E, right, as in egg, like the E as in egg being the word E, not the example.
That's not how you spell egg.
Yeah. So I'm waiting for him. I know he's just waiting to hear this. So, I go feet. The dude takes off. I go, it didn't end with E, where's blue, it's where he takes off and does it again for a math problem. I go, Shane. And he just yells, I got an accountant for that shit. He does come back. And some of the other guys are just like, damn, like I'm used to being the alpha dog because I'm the fastest, this and that. Like, that sucked. And that's just a low level example. There's other things that you can do no matter what competition. Like, you got a naturally stronger fit guy, put him in another situation. It's not to make fun of them or belittle them. It's just to help them wake up to the fact that there's some element of balance missing there.
Well, listen, I'm not going to tell you I enjoy failing. I mean, it doesn't, like, I've been failing. I'm 40 years old. I've been failing for 40 years of my life, and I'm still pissed off when it happens. I mean, I think now it's a lot of, I've been doing a lot more self-reflection, and I've been doing a lot more at the end of the day, going through my day in specific situations and how I handle them. It could have been a hockey game I was playing, as simple as this, like a friendly hockey game, and some guy drew a penalty on me or something was called me, and I felt that amount of anger, and I might have reacted with some verbal bullshit, right? And then turn around being like, you know what, you could have handled that a little bit better. So those are the things that I'm really doing now personally to help out people. But I'm even discussing it with my clients. Like I'll grab them and I'll say, listen, I know you're pissed off, but remember, I'm here for you right now. Like, let's just calm down, take a deep breath. If you don't have to talk to me the whole session, don't fucking talk to me. But we're here to make sure that when you leave here, you're feeling a lot better. And sometimes a simple approach like that and in that tone, it makes things click for them.
Yeah. And I know I talk a lot with Brett about psychopaths. I've been watching a couple of shows on Netflix that deal with psychopaths and profiling and all that. So getting into these personality types, and I want Brett to talk a bit about it, but this idea that maybe there's a lot of psychopaths that aren't serial killers, but they're operating in society and being successful because of these traits. So if they're, callous and lacking empathy, and that's making them move ahead in society, are there some things about psychopaths that we can either access ourselves and make us more effective without being callous and lacking empathy? And how do we deal with people who may have those traits? Can you talk a bit about that, Brett?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of, I'm not really vocal about this because I don't want people to take it the wrong way, but this has kind of become my main infatuation as a subject within the art of coaching type stuff, just because a while ago I had stumbled onto a book and research from a guy named Kevin Dutton, who's a postdoctoral researcher at Oxford in abnormal psychology. And he specializes in studying psychopaths. And here in Atlanta at Emory University is a gentleman named Scott Lilienfeld, who's the world's foremost expert on psychopaths. And both of them say everything that you just kind of mentioned is our traditional view of psychopathic tendencies is completely askew. Like it's not Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees or people that, like these Jeffrey Dahmer. Like psychopathic tendencies are really identified by people that have lower than normal empathetic traits and then exhibit an extreme steadfastness in regards to their behavior. And so, Don, I'm sure you come across many of these in New York, the typical Wall Street guy, and this is peer-reviewed research that shows most successful companies, if you look at their CEOs, they're going to rank higher in traits of psychopathy. Another reason that tends to be the case is because we were talking about failure. A hallmark tendency of those that rank high in traits of psychopathy is they can let go of mistakes and past incidences relatively quickly. So if you look at, I'm going to try not to get too nerdy here, but if you look at game theory, which is basically, an economist's game that they use to basically say, hey, if you have a number of intelligent opponents working against one another where nobody truly knows what the other one's going to do, who's going to win out, it's typically the individual that can continually move forward without remembering a past failure or harboring a grudge, right? They're just extremely utilitarianistic. Like there's a utilitarian outcome and a pragmatic outcome. Emotions don't get in the way. Another hallmark example is if, let's say Pedro is the psychopath that we're studying, and, there's somebody on track A, and it's one person tied up, and if he doesn't hit the lever, it's going to kill them. But if he does hit the lever, it's going to kill 5 other people, right? He, without questioning, will make the decision in which he kills one person to save 5. Now, the normal person, they'd sit there and not know what to do. And they show that when they look at functional MRI and when they're met with these kinds of situations, they don't know what to do. The psychopath won't even budge. Boom, that's done. We wanted to save 5 people. Now I'm sorry?
I mean, it almost sounds like it's business. Like this is a business decision.
Yeah, to a degree. And what was interesting is if you look at this one study, they talk about there is people in the age of technology put together these bots, and these bots have these algorithms that dictated their behavior. And this foremost researcher in psychology and strategy and all this got all these people together. So there were folks in academics, there were true criminal psychopaths, there were all military generals, there were all this, and everybody was responsible through the work of this university professor of creating this algorithm, and the university did it for them. And these bots competed against one another in this kind of digital game of game theory. If they were putting together in this zombie land, who would come out as the winner? And again, it was the one that if somebody collaborated with them, they'd collaborate the next time. That's how the bot was programmed. If that person backstabbed them, they'd backstab them the next time. The bottom line is it always was the one who adapted to the environment and could make non-judgmental or emotional decisions and just keep moving forward. Now, of course, there's a dark side to that too. And the researchers acknowledge that. They're not saying this is how everybody should be. Although there are researchers that think that that's basically the next stage of evolution. There's some people that suggest, I'm not suggesting this, but there's people in the research that say psychopaths are literally more evolved intellectual individuals because they don't get muddied up by the emotion that can so often muddy our logic. But there's so many different arguments to that. The point is what they do find is when working with a diverse range of people, you do benefit from adopting some psychopathic tendencies where you cannot let your emotions get too intertwined and you can just move on. And they say that's the difference between empathy on one side of the spectrum and apathy. We don't really want to be either of those when we're working with people. What you want is in the middle, which is compassion. So empathy is I feel what you feel. Apathy is obviously I don't give a shit what you feel. Compassion is I understand what you feel, but you can still distance yourself from that.
Wow. You work with any psychopaths, Don?
Me? No comment. Who's diagnosing them? Me? Yeah. It depends on what day and if they had their coffee or not. So yeah. I mean, but it's funny, Brett, because you're talking about this right now, and things are going off in my head, like signs of specific people and specific instances on their behavior. You just immediately thought of I've looked at specific individuals, high profile people who've been able to make specific non-emotional decisions. Like, well, how'd you decide that? That would have taken, they're almost like, no, fuck them. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that type of attitude, like this is the right outcome and we have to do it. And, you know, you see it in layoffs, you know, you see certain people can just do it easily. Me, anytime, unfortunately, I own my business, unfortunately, I have to make layoffs at times for whatever reason it is. And I'm not going to lie to tell you that, you know, every time it's tough. It is. You got to sit down with the person and there is a level of, you know, empathy that I'm showing and, you know, towards them. And it's never easy. You know, it's never easy. Some people are just like, oh, we're letting you go. See ya. Like, and they literally have no attachment, no stress, and they move on. And, you know, I guess it's just some people are born, again, I feel like you're born that way, you know?
Yeah, it's definitely all on a spectrum. And I just think that, you know, it's unfortunate that we kind of live in the time that we do where people can take a word and run with it and make it mean whatever they want to mean, because there are, you know, most people would think that, oh gosh, I rank high in traits of psychopathy, or this person's a psychopath, and there's this label on them. And it's certainly never for us to clinically diagnose. Like, none of us are ever trained to do that. It's just learning lessons from people that are on this spectrum, you know, and the same thing it goes with, they found Theodore Roosevelt, historians and clinical psychologists that do profiles of past presidents ranked him the highest on traits of psychopathy. And you think about that, like, he led us during a very difficult time economically and otherwise. So he ranked high in traits of narcissism and psychopathy. And people think, oh, narcissism's bad. Well, sure. Again, if it's a trait, if it's a stable disposition. But if somebody deploys narcissistic behaviors, which the research say that's the selective deployment of a trait. So, hey, the country's going to shit. We really need somebody who thinks they can turn it around. I can. Oh, you think that you can lead the free world out of, you know, depression or recession or any of this? Well, that's a narcissistic type of behavior because you think you're the one capable to get that done. So there's not only a spectrum of like where these things are, there's also a difference between a trait. If somebody is a narcissist, they're always that way, regardless of social or environmental context. If it's a behavior that they deploy, that just means every once in a while they'll show this version of themselves in order to get a utilitarian outcome to come about. It's hard for people to kind of really delineate the two, but there's a lot of research on it. It's pretty fascinating.
It's funny. It's the first time that someone's ever taken the word narcissism and actually were able to relate it to something with, in my eyes, a positive outcome. I mean, when you were talking about that, I was thinking about a leader who was just incredibly confident. But you were
super confidence to a degree.
But narcissistic is almost a notch above confidence, isn't it? Or do you?
Yeah, that's what they say. I mean, and there's you know, Michael Gervais has a podcast where they talk about this on an episode too, where it's basically elevated confidence. I mean, just like anything, researchers have scales when people take these kinds of tests or get evaluated in which these certain traits align, right? Like everybody's higher than some on others. And so what you find out is these terms really don't mean what we think they mean. We think that if somebody's got a narcissistic trait, like think about that. If your significant other's like, hey, Debbie's coming over, she's a bit of a narcissist, like immediately you're like, oh God.
Oh, here we go. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what I mean? But like that takes on a completely different meaning when you're talking about leadership spectrums and how people choose to lead and communicate. Like you can have that trait sometimes and you can have it, you know, behavior, you can leverage it on certain times and not on others. So it's pretty interesting stuff. It's called the leadership paradox, and they talk about it in that book. And then also we have a brief chapter about it in my book if people want to read more. If I ever wrote a second book, it would be on a lot of these topics.
Can you tell everyone the name of your book again?
Yeah. Just Conscious Coaching. I think Derek's got a copy of it. Derek, flash the copy.
Flash the copy. Conscious Coaching, and you can purchase that on Amazon pretty much anywhere.
Amazon, Audible, Kindle, like it's
Love
on
it.
Carrier Pigeon, Yeah, so just wrote that in April of last year. So independently published, and it was a process, but hopefully.
Well, I can't wait to read it because this is some interesting stuff. And again, this is showing me an area that I'm a little deficient in, and I'm going to have to do some reading on it. But I think it's unbelievable stuff. Incredibly interesting, Brett.
Yeah, well, thanks. And yeah, I would say you of all people are probably not deficient in that, but it's kind of your humility is noted.
It's interesting because I'm just going to hold this up to my head. That we talk about, like, say, social media, and I know Brett and I, and even Don, like, it's tough for me sometimes to get up in front of a camera and start talking about myself and overcoming that, and being a little selfish, narcissistic is of value. Don't you both agree? Like, but it's not that it's a negative thing, but it is something that some of us who are not psychopaths have to push ourselves constantly to do. Do you guys find that?
Don, you want to hit this first?
Yeah, I mean, up until 2 minutes ago, I thought it was a negative thing, but Brett put it in a way where, I'm realizing, wow, it could actually be a positive trait to have as a leader, right? Yeah. As a CEO. I think you probably have to have a little bit of that, if not a lot. In a way, it forces you to be a little resilient. You're not making emotional decisions, which I have made in the past. I mean, even opening my club, when I opened it, I was probably 27, 28 years old. It took me 2 to 3 years to actually find a location, get through a lease with a landlord, a term sheet. I was so young at the time that people weren't taking me seriously. And when it came down to signing the lease, there's still things today that, you're feeling the heat from. There were some emotional decisions where if I was to go back and do it differently, I would have done it differently. But I think emotional decisions is something that, as much as it can help us, it can really hurt us too.
If you really loved Conscious Coaching, you're going to love Righteous Narcissism by Brett Bartholomew.
Yeah. I think, like, for me, it comes down to, again, the concept of utilitarianism. Like, if the end goal is one that's going to help people, I realized that I needed to get myself out there a little bit more. I did a really poor job. And, like, Don, I've looked you up a good bit. Like, you probably have the most robust network of any of us for sure. But, like, to his point, I had a similar weakness, and Derek, you too. I had came out of collegiate strength and conditioning and just completely bought into this idea that coaches are supposed to be seen, not heard. You're not online. You're not on social media. Eventually, I started getting on that stuff slowly because I just thought, if I'm not part of the solution, I'm part of the problem. And then, it was so bad that, like, when that book came out, like, I didn't even do any marketing for it. Like, the guy that runs my website goes, "Cool, do you have a mailing list?" And I'm like, "Huh?" And he's like, "Dude, you don't have a mailing list?" I'm like, "No, man." Like, and I tried to explain to him, I go, "You have to understand that stuff's not cool in strength and conditioning. Like, you're a sellout if you have these things." And he was like, "At some point, man, you're going to have to evolve beyond this mindset. Like, if you have something that has value and it can help other people, then you have a responsibility to put it out." And some of my athletes told me the same shit. And it was the athletes that really got on me, and they're like, "I know you don't want to get on this stuff, man, but you need to." And so I'm really dipping my toes in the water now. My next project, the online course that's a follow-up to the book, I finally just started asking people for help. And I said, "Hey, you know what? I don't want to bug you. I know you have your own stuff going on. I'm trying to get this in the hands of as many people as possible. I've worked a lot on it. I promise it's research-backed. It's not fluff. Would you mind just sharing it with your network?" And, I'm hoping it works out, like, you never really know, but I guess I'm just saying is I never asked for help or never put myself out there in the past. And then I looked at it, and what I thought was being, like, altruistic was really this sense of martyrdom that is really not only unattractive, but ineffective at helping more people in a scalable fashion.
Well, you know what, without even reading it yet, I know I'm going to love it. So any help that I can do and I can hand out, let me know. I'll put it through my social channels. I'll get in the hands of some of my coaches, and we'll be talking about it. But I think this is brilliant stuff.
Means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. And I just want to, like, one thing I want to finish with both of you guys is your experience in working in sport and fitness, how many of these concepts cross over into business, life, mental health, education? Like, do you think there's a lot of takeaways that you guys have experienced from just working with people on a physical level and coaching?
Yeah, I mean, I think, mental health jumps out first and foremost because I dealt with depression as a teenager. And that's a lot of what got me into coaching is, being hospitalized, doing all this stuff, having, basically an exercise addiction because that was my way to deal with my friends doing drugs and my parents' divorce and all this stuff. And at the time, I didn't know how to train or nourish my body. And next thing you know, I'm in an eating disorder clinic. And it was learning more about strength and conditioning formally and nutrition that brought me out of that. So, that's the stuff, like when I say strength and conditioning saved my life, I mean that literally. And I think that's the one thing we can all agree on in terms of metrics that transfer to any walk of life is confidence, right? That ability to know that like I prepared, I did something to push myself, I did these things. I think the rapport piece, that goes hand in hand. I mean, the physical, psychological, and the relational all play a part. I think all of us can probably say that we're at our best when we're active. I mean, I've tried writing a little bit more this year, which I absolutely hate, but I find that like I write like shit if I haven't worked out before I actually sit down to my computer. I do most things like shit if I haven't worked out because it's just, I'm a naturally kind of anxious, go. I've got to get these thoughts out of my head person. So I think that, the physical side of it absolutely helps mental health, effectiveness, and just overall clarity. I'm not big into the mindfulness stuff, though I can certainly appreciate it. But my mindfulness is my own training and then being able to train others and be in that environment with them.
Awesome. I mean, I can't top that. You pretty much summed everything up. But what I do know is I've been giving a relation lately between what someone has to do to actually achieve their goals in fitness, health, wellness, and business. And I think it's the same thing. I think at the end of the day, in business, we got to set an exit. We have to set that end game. Charlie Weingroff talks about it, start at the finish. So you get the finish line set up and then we got to work backwards and we almost have to know the steps. In fitness, it's the same way, whether someone's trying to improve their 40 time or drop 50 pounds. I think you set the goal in mind, but you don't sit there and you don't obsess over the goal day in and day out. But you obsess over what it takes that day. What are your tasks at hand that day to be great? You want to improve your 40? Well, this is what we're going to have to do. On this day, we've got a speed day. We've got to work on our mobility, our recovery. We got to make sure we're getting rest, that we're fueling the body properly, and that we're not taxing the nervous system too much by going out. If we do that today on Monday, that's great. How does Tuesday change? It changes. But what happens is even with weight loss, I see it more in weight loss. People obsessed. I'm not losing weight. I'm like, because you're so stressed out over it. Relax. We know what the goal is. We've established that plan. Let's focus on what we have to do today. Let's do it to the best of our ability. Let's wake up tomorrow and then let's attack it again.
Well, how do we get people to go to your website? What's the website that we want to direct people to, Brett?
Just artofcoaching.com. So within the next, it's up now and you can sign up for the newsletter that will tell you about the course and all that. But artofcoaching.com is going to have everything with the book, the communication field guide, the online course. I'm now moving all my stuff over to that. So that's the easiest way, or you can find the book on Amazon and Audible. Again, it's called Conscious Coaching, but artofcoaching.com will start to house all that.
Yeah, and this doesn't just apply to sports and fitness, but it could be for organizations. Like you've told us, you've done some presentations.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, like last year I was fortunate. Microsoft reached out and they had used the book to help solve some kind of internal issues they were looking to just figure out more resources for. It's not like I solved their issues, but the book provided another reference point. Facebook as well. And so we've seen kind of the book has taken off in both military side and corporate side. And to be honest, that's where I want to continue to focus because coaches are the core of that audience and they're important. But at the same time, if you want to scale it, I think we can all agree we've read our fair share of like these kinds of books from CEOs, from doctors, what have you. I don't feel like there had been one from a coach, like at least a strength coach or trainer or anybody outward. And so that's what I really want to make this. Something like Jocko Willink did for the military community.
Well, listen, Brett, thank you for coming on. If you're ever in New York, I want you to stop by the club, use the gym. You guys got to bring some of your crew by, whatever you need. My door is open, and just let me know how I can help when it comes to promoting all this stuff. I really believe in what you're doing. It was really special. It was my favorite interview by far. I know we haven't had a lot, but I've been around a lot of people, and you've got it, man. So keep it up.